A woman screamed as she collapsed onto the church floor. The pastor pressed his palm against her forehead and shouted, "Leave her now!" The woman shook violently before becoming completely still. The congregation erupted into thunderous applause. "Another miracle!" someone cried. Pastor Ezekiel slowly lifted a crystal bottle filled with golden-colored liquid. "Holy water," he declared, "blessed by the hand of heaven itself. Whoever drinks this today shall never leave this place the same." The ushers hurried through the crowded church, handing a small cup to every worshiper. One by one, people drank without hesitation. Some wept, some laughed. Some claimed they could feel fire running through their bodies. Then the line reached the wealthiest man in the church. Jonathan Hartley accepted the cup with a polite smile. Everyone watched. Instead of drinking, he quietly lowered the cup. Pastor Ezekiel's eyes narrowed. "My son," he called from the altar. "Why do you hesitate?" Jonathan bowed respectfully. "I mean no disrespect, Pastor." "Then drink." "I cannot." A heavy silence settled over the sanctuary. The pastor forced a smile. "Perhaps you would rather come forward so I may pray for you." Jonathan shook his head. "I appreciate your concern, but I must refuse." The congregation gasped. No one had ever rejected the pastor's prayer. No one had ever refused the holy water. For a brief moment, something strange flashed across Pastor Ezekiel's face. His warm smile disappeared. His eyes darkened with anger before the pleasant expression returned. "As you wish," he said softly. But inside, something sinister had awakened. "Hello there, and greetings from anywhere you're watching this video from. Do you know personal relationship with God is one of the greatest treasures anyone can have? When you truly know His voice, you won't be easily deceived by every loud preacher, dramatic miracle, or convincing prophecy. Not everyone who stands behind a pulpit speaks for heaven, and not every supernatural act comes from the light. Today's story is a powerful fictional church folktale about faith, discernment, and the courage to obey the quiet warning in your spirit, even when everyone else believes the opposite. Stay with this story until the very end, because its shocking conclusion may challenge the way you think about true spiritual leadership. If you enjoy meaningful stories with powerful lessons, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments. Have you ever ignored a warning in your heart and later realized it was protecting you? Your answer might encourage someone else. Now let's continue with the story. The church emptied slowly after the service. Small groups gathered outside, whispering as Jonathan Hartley walked past them. "Did you see what he did? He refused the holy water again. I've never seen anyone reject Pastor Ezekiel like that. They say pride comes before destruction." Jonathan heard every word. He neither slowed his steps nor looked back. He simply tipped his hat politely to those who greeted him and continued toward his carriage. One elderly woman hurried after him. "Mr. Hartley." Jonathan stopped. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Ellis." She looked around to make sure no one was listening. "Please forgive me for asking, but why do you keep refusing the pastor? People are beginning to think you've turned away from God." Jonathan smiled kindly. "I've never turned away from God." "Then why won't you let Pastor Ezekiel pray over you?" Jonathan paused. There is a difference between trusting God and trusting every person who claims to speak for him. Mrs. Ellis frowned. "You truly believe something is wrong?" "I pray every day that I'm mistaken." He climbed into his carriage and quietly rode away. The old woman stood frozen. His words echoed in her mind. Meanwhile, Pastor Ezekiel locked himself inside his private prayer room beneath the church. The room looked nothing like the sanctuary upstairs. The walls were covered with strange markings. Black candles burned without melting. The air smelled of smoke and old earth. The chained book rested on a stone table. The pastor slowly placed both hands upon it. "I have served you faithfully," he whispered. A cold wind swept through the room, although every window was closed. A dark voice answered from the shadows. "One soul still escapes you." Pastor Ezekiel lowered his head. "Jonathan Hartley." "Why?" "I cannot touch him." The silence that followed felt heavy. Then the voice returned. "He carries a covering." "I've tried everything." "Then break his will." "How?" "Make the people turn against him." The candles suddenly flared. The room became quiet again. Pastor Ezekiel smiled. "So be it." The following Sunday arrived sooner than anyone expected. Long before sunrise, people lined up outside the church. Word had spread throughout the town. Pastor Ezekiel had announced that heaven had given him a special revelation. Every member would receive a personal deliverance, no exceptions. Inside the sanctuary, excitement filled the room. The choir sang with unusual passion. People embraced one another. Some had traveled for hours just to attend. Jonathan entered quietly and took his usual seat near the back. Almost immediately, people noticed him. Whispers began again. "Will he refuse today?" "He won't dare." The pastor already announced everyone must come forward. Jonathan remained calm. He closed his eyes and prayed silently. Moments later, Pastor Ezekiel stepped onto the platform. The congregation stood to their feet. "My beloved children!" "Louder!" someone shouted. "Amen," the crowd responded. The pastor smiled. "Today chains will be broken." Cheers filled the building. "Today every curse shall leave." More shouting. "And today," his eyes settled on Jonathan, "every stubborn heart will surrender." The congregation erupted again. Jonathan slowly opened his eyes. For the first time, he realized those words were meant for him. The sermon was unusually short. Instead, Pastor Ezekiel spent most of the service speaking about obedience. God cannot bless those who resist his servants. A rebellious spirit blocks miracles. When God sends his prophet, refusal is disobedience. Many people nodded. Some glanced toward Jonathan. The message was obvious. When the sermon ended, the ushers carried baskets filled with small bottles of holy water and jars of anointing oil. Soft music began playing. People formed a long line leading to the altar. One after another, Pastor Ezekiel placed oil on their foreheads. Each person drank from a small cup of holy water. Many collapsed to the floor. Some laughed. Others cried uncontrollably. Several shouted that they could see angels. Jonathan watched quietly. Something about their eyes disturbed him. They seemed empty. Then he noticed a young boy tugging at his mother's dress. "Mother?" She didn't answer. "Mother?" Her eyes remained fixed on the pastor. The boy looked frightened. Jonathan gently walked over. "Is everything all right?" the boy whispered. "She won't listen to me." Jonathan looked at the woman. She stared toward the altar without blinking, almost as if she were in a trance. After several moments, she suddenly blinked, looked around in confusion, and hugged her son tightly. What happened?" The little boy began crying. "You wouldn't answer me." Jonathan's concern deepened. This wasn't the first time he had witnessed something like this. As the line grew shorter, Pastor Ezekiel smiled. Only one person remained seated: Jonathan. The pastor's voice echoed through the sanctuary. "Brother Jonathan," every head turned, "would you honor us by coming forward?" Jonathan slowly stood. The room became so quiet that even a whisper could be heard. He walked toward the altar, not with fear, not with anger, but with complete peace. Pastor Ezekiel stretched out both arms. "Today is the day the Lord sets you free." Jonathan stopped several feet away. I'm already free." The smile on the pastor's face barely moved. "Then let us celebrate that freedom together." He uncorked a bottle of holy water and held it toward Jonathan. "Drink." Jonathan looked at the bottle, then into the pastor's eyes. "No." A murmur swept through the congregation. The pastor picked up a small vial of oil. "Then allow me to anoint you." Jonathan took one respectful step backward. "I cannot." Pastor Ezekiel's voice hardened. "Why?" Jonathan answered quietly enough for everyone to hear. "Because the Spirit of God has warned me for years, never to let your hand touch my head." The entire church fell into stunned silence. The silence inside the church became almost unbearable. No one moved. No one breathed. Pastor Ezekiel slowly lowered the bottle of holy water. "You should be careful with your words, Jonathan." Jonathan stood his ground. "I have been. For 5 years. For 5 years." The pastor chuckled softly. "So you believe God has been warning only you while everyone else here has been deceived?" Jonathan looked around the sanctuary. "I don't believe these people are evil." He turned back toward the pastor. "I believe they are searching for hope. And hope can sometimes make good people trust the wrong person." Several members exchanged uneasy glances. Pastor Ezekiel's smile faded. "You accuse a servant of God before his own congregation," Jonathan answered calmly. "I accuse no servant of God." He took another slow breath. "I only refuse to call darkness by the name of light." The congregation erupted into murmurs. "Enough!" the pastor thundered. The room instantly became still. He stepped down from the platform. His polished shoes echoed across the floor until he stood only inches away from Jonathan. "If your faith is genuine," he stretched out his hand, "prove it." Jonathan remained motionless. "No." The pastor leaned closer. "Or perhaps you're afraid." "I'm not afraid of you." "Then let me touch your forehead." "I cannot." "Cannot?" The pastor's voice suddenly became unnaturally deep. "Or will not?" Jonathan quietly replied, "I will obey God before I obey any man." At that moment, every light inside the sanctuary flickered. The choir stopped singing. A freezing wind swept through the room, even though every door and window remained shut. Children began crying. The church members looked around in confusion. One elderly deacon whispered, "What's happening?" Pastor Ezekiel slowly smiled. Only this time, there was nothing kind about it. "So," he whispered, "you finally forced my hand." His eyes began glowing with an unnatural darkness. The stained glass windows rattled violently. The floor trembled beneath everyone's feet. People screamed and rushed toward the exits. But the massive church doors slammed shut by themselves. Panic spread through the congregation. "Open the doors! We're trapped! What is happening?" Jonathan never took his eyes off the pastor. "I prayed it wouldn't come to this." Pastor Ezekiel laughed. The sound no longer sounded human. "For years I've worn this disguise." He slowly removed the white collar around his neck and threw it onto the floor. "You all believed every miracle. You believed every prophecy. You believed every performance. And none of you asked who gave me such power." Dark shadows began twisting around him like smoke. The bottles of holy water on the altar shattered one after another. The golden liquid spread across the floor before disappearing into thick black mist. People fell to their knees in terror. Mrs. Ellis covered her mouth. It wasn't holy water." Jonathan spoke with quiet conviction. "It never was." The pastor spread his arms. "Faith without discernment is the easiest thing in the world to manipulate." His laughter echoed through the sanctuary. "I never needed all of you." His glowing eyes locked onto Jonathan. "I only wanted one soul. The one I could never reach." Jonathan slowly reached into his coat pocket. He removed a small, worn Bible. Its leather cover showed years of use. He held it close to his chest. "I've carried this with me every day since my grandfather gave it to me." Pastor Ezekiel sneered. "A book?" Jonathan nodded. "He taught me something long before he died." The pastor folded his arms. "And what wisdom did the old man leave behind?" Jonathan answered without hesitation. He said, "The voice of God will never demand that you ignore the truth He has already placed in your heart." The words seemed to shake the room. Several church members suddenly remembered moments they had ignored. The pressure to obey without question. The fear of asking honest questions. The guilt they felt whenever they hesitated. One by one, they realized those feelings had never brought them peace. Pastor Ezekiel roared, "No!" Dark shadows rushed toward Jonathan. But before they reached him, a brilliant light surrounded him like a shield. The shadows recoiled. The congregation watched in stunned silence. Jonathan closed his eyes. His voice remained steady. "Evil can imitate appearances, but it cannot overcome truth." The light grew brighter. The black mist filling the sanctuary began disappearing. The strange symbols hidden beneath the pastor's sleeve started glowing before crumbling into dust. Pastor Ezekiel staggered backward. "This is impossible." "No," Jonathan replied. "It is the moment your deception ends." The chains hanging around the pastor's neck snapped apart. His dark power began leaving him. He screamed as the shadows dissolved into nothing. The church doors burst open. Warm sunlight flooded the sanctuary. The freezing air disappeared. The unnatural silence lifted. Pastor Ezekiel collapsed onto the floor. The congregation stared in disbelief. No one applauded. No one celebrated. Many simply wept. Not because they had lost a pastor, but because they realized how easily they had mistaken spectacle for truth. Weeks later, the church reopened under humble new leadership. There were no dramatic performances, no mysterious bottles, no frightening displays, only sincere worship, compassionate service, and careful teaching. Jonathan continued sitting near the back, exactly where he always had. One Sunday after the service, Mrs. Ellis approached him. "I finally understand," Jonathan smiled. "What do you understand?" "God was protecting you long before any of us knew we needed protecting." Jonathan nodded gently. "He was protecting all of us. We simply had to learn to listen." She looked toward the quiet church. "I'll never forget this. Neither will I." As Jonathan walked home beneath the evening sky, he remembered his grandfather's words once more. Never build your faith on personalities. Build it on truth, wisdom, and a genuine relationship with God. Because titles can deceive, crowds can be mistaken, miracles can be imitated in stories, but discernment, humility, and a sincere pursuit of truth remain priceless. And that, perhaps, was the greatest lesson of all. If this fictional church folktale made you think, take a moment to let us know in the comments. What was the biggest lesson you learned from Jonathan's story? We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next captivating tale filled with mystery, wisdom, and unforgettable twists. Until next time, remember, seek truth with both faith and wisdom, and never stop listening for the quiet voice that leads you toward what is good.